He's got decades of experience in digital transformation, and he's recently become part of the founding team of Great Grants. So we have plenty to talk about today, including AI, church tech, how faith-based organizations can innovate without losing their mission. We're pumped to have you.
Well, thanks for having me.
So people probably don't know in my audience what Servant is. So in 30 seconds, 60 seconds, what's Servant.io and who do you serve?
All right. Well, we are a business and technology consulting company, and we are exclusively focused in serving the faith-based community. So we consider both for-profits and nonprofits as part of customers we serve. What we filter for is the Christ-centered vision and mission of the leader.
Mm-hmm.
And our goal is to come alongside them, help them with their effective business strategies, product strategies, and then help them roll out the next generation products that they can serve their customers with.
Gotcha. And you sort of define this. You describe your client as kingdom organizations, but you broadly think not just ministries, but for-profits, people who are really trying to change the world for Christ.
That's right. I think we, as individuals, like to sort of categorize things in buckets.
Mm-hmm.
And I think God looks at it slightly differently. And so when we think of the church, we think of ministry and marketplace, because there's this incredible number of marketplace leaders. That's what I consider myself, that are trying to live out our calling inside of the person of the kingdom. And so marketplace leaders carry a tremendous responsibilities to steward and care for the employees that work for them, is to be able to generate wealth, and which is used for the church. And we have a ministry side of the house, which is trying to think about how do we preach, teach, evangelize, disciple, and show mercy to those in our community.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about churches and ministries, because part of what you're doing is helping them modernize. What's the most common mistake? What's the most common thing you see with them when they're trying to modernize?
I think one of the common problems, I'd say there's two that I think about. One is that we feel underneath a lot of pressure today. I don't know if you get that a lot from the folks you've talked about, but you got to do something. And so what they do is they say, we got to do something, so therefore we're just going to start doing things.
Yep.
And what I like to do is to say, pull back and say, what are we chasing?
Yep.
So God, I believe, has given a distinct calling on leaders. They've given them a vision and a mission to go. And so the question is, how do we use that as our anchor point? And then how do we sort of think about new ways of being able to sort of accomplish that? So first one is they feel the urgency to move, and they start moving, and without necessarily saying like, where is it that I'm going? So I like to really to catalyze and clarify the vision that they're being handed, to make sure that becomes a North Star, and which does a hard sort of all the different things that they do, so they don't waste a lot of effort. The second thing that they do is that there's this interesting aspect of innovation where they're like, I got to reinvent everything. I got to blow it all up.
You're right.
And I've seen this going for 20 years where like something new comes on the scene, and it's like, the world's changed and we got to do this all. And what I find is that there's actually three forms of innovation. And I like to challenge people to pause and say, what part of it is actually appropriate for you?
Right.
Because they all have a different set of costs associated to it, not just from dollars, but also from the mental capacity and the organizational momentum. All these things have to come to make them happen. And so those three forms of innovation is the classic one that people think about, which is new.
Mm-hmm.
I got to reinvent everything. The next one actually is looking at, I have current ways that I want to do new thing. I want to take the current things I do and do it in new ways. So I'm not inventing the way that I serve. I'm really reinventing the how that I do what I normally do. And then the third one is I have these legacy systems that I just want to make operate currently and more efficiently. Mm-hmm. All three of those are disruptive to an organization. All three of them give a great return. And so what I like to do is to say, don't run towards that new. Less than 10% of organizations that I've worked with have the organizational capacity and ability to chase new. Most of the time, they're going to sit into the idea of like, how do I modernize what I have and make legacy current to get a real good efficiency, and then find creative ways of doing the existing things that I'm doing on a normal day basis.
Mm-hmm. I like the way you're thinking about that. And you've talked a lot as part of what you do about AI, right? Everybody's back and forth about that, try to figure out what that is. What do we do with it? What do we not do with it? Should we be scared of it? Should we think it's awesome? You've talked about it enabling more relational engagement. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah. Well, I definitely think that you should be excited about AI.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited by technology, always have been. I think if you look back, we talk about how the Gutenberg press sort of freed the ability for the gospel to be unleashed. The Roman roads allowed us to carry to the end. We've been living with technology innovation our entire lives. The plow was a technology innovation at some point into it.
Right.
Innovation is just the creation of something new. And so we should be really embracing this we should be embracing new and have a posture full of excitement for it. But as with everything, what we have to do is sort of, when everything new comes on the scene, as leaders, we owe it to our teams, and as kingdom leaders, we owe it to the communities of people we serve to play forward the scenario a bit. All right, if we're going to leverage this technology, how do we do this in a way that ultimately gets us to the outcomes that we feel called to do? And I feel like one of our outcomes that we're called to do as Christian leaders is to be able to seek the flourishing of our cities. And so what we do is we say, okay, great, God, you've given us an incredibly new tool for us to use in AI, which is this really powerful inference engine or predictive engine that allows us to kind of create, custom generated content for, in terms of response to questions or to be able to sort of serve somebody. So it allows us to get really individualized. So a very powerful tool. God, how do I use this tool in a way that actually seeks the flourishing of the communities I live in? And so that's what I call about the relational aspect of it. Technology, I know I might kind of step back and might get a little bit, heady for a second.
Right.
But if you watch technology, it is developed in response to market forces. So I've been running Servant for 6 years, but before that, I spent 20 plus years in the private markets, building venture capital, working with private equity, and working with Fortune 1000 companies. So I have a wide range of views on industry and the use of technology. And a lot of the effort for it was to simply say, how do we scale revenue and how do we scale profitability of our products and services? And one of the most powerful ways of doing that is to move towards this idea of self-sufficiency, self-service. Hey, so when you get online, hey, instead of calling me, why don't you actually just use my website? Why don't you use my apps to actually go ahead and file your own claim, follow up on your claim? So what I did is I was able to serve more people, but actually my cost of service was driven super low. And so that market force has driven technology where I'm like, I need you to actually just take care of you and to pay me to do that.
Right.
Social media is actually not social as much as it is around this idea of self-consumption. And so our technology has been very heavily driven down that path because the market has wanted to do that. And so what we have is a technology optimized to high reach, low touch as the model. Well, now, if we continue to use technology as the way it was designed, what we have is we'll say, well, we can take that same pattern of high reach, low touch, try to bring that in the church. And what you realize is what you give up is relationships.
Yeah.
And as a church, if we're thinking about seeking the flourishing of our communities, what we have is like God's design is to have people in proximity to people, and that's relational. So actually what that is high touch, not low touch.
Right.
And so so what I like to do is help understand is like technology has been shaped by the desire, by the market force, and it's landed in this high reach, low touch model. And so, but here's another thing about technology is that it will do what you tell it to do.
Right.
The reason why we had to understand how it's designed is because that basically says if we don't put constraints on it and we don't tell it what to do, this is where it will end.
Right.
And so what we want to do is to say like, all right, if my outcome is human flourishing, and to have human flourishing, there has to be proximity, which is high touch. And the technologies that have been built today move towards low touch, high reach. I have to actually go ahead and say, no, I got to actually tell technology what I want it to do, which is to actually be a low reach, small groups of people in a high touch scenario. And by doing that, what we can do is we can then see that flourishing of those relationships done at large scale. And so that's where I think about when I'm passionate about the idea like technology should be relational, what I'm challenging us to do is to seek the outcome, which is flourishing, understanding what has to be in place for flourishing to be, and use that as the guardrails in which technology such as powerful as AI can be used, and not leave it up to the creators of these technologies to dictate how it actually rolls out.
Yeah. So when you're approaching these organizations, part of the decision-making matrix for a lot of them, myself included, as we think about our organization, is when do you build something yourself? When do you buy something off the shelf? When do you use HubSpot because it exists? When do you go build your own CRM?
Yeah.
How do you think about that?
It's a great question, and one that we should all be looking at. I have a set of design principles. I'm someone that loves constraints. I think we thrive well within constraints. And so at Servant, we have 4 design principles that we govern how we serve people, the solutions that we build So if we build strategies, we build products, we do AI transformation, right? Those are the three things we do. These are the 4 design constraints for it. The first one is we have to know who we're serving at the end of the day. It's very easy to lose sight and pursue technology for the sake of itself, as opposed to realizing that at the other side of that screen is a person, and that person has a story. And how do we make sure that we are serving that person? There's a value we're creating for them, and we're being respectful for the story. So if I can't see that, I just simply say this idea isn't going to work.
Right.
And I have too much respect for the people across the table to go ahead and spend money on an idea that won't work.
Right.
And so that's our first design constraint. The second one is we say collaborate wherever possible, build only where necessary.
Right.
And that gets into the whole build versus buy. There's one of the reasons on why we kind of move into we got to build it ourselves is that we don't take the moment to pause and say, what are we actually trying to accomplish? And separate out and then also say, what I feel called to do is there's others that are also feeling that same calling. I feel like God invites us into his story and then into his vision. I don't feel like any of the visions that I'm leading right now are mine. I feel like these are ones that God's called me into. And the great part about understanding that language, right? I'm called into his, is that, Kurt, if he's called me into it, guess what? He's called others into it.
Yeah.
And it allows me to actually have a posture of looking around for those that God's called into the vision. Some are going to work for me and my team, but many times it's going to be another organization and we're going to be partnering together. And so that point of collaboration is really important for us, because now what we get to do is, one is that we start to see in a collaborative environment, there's just there's a ability to sort of grow the opportunity in a much more significant way than if you just simply go after yourself. So you move into a cooperative posture for it. The second thing is it allows you to sort of figure out how do we share the cost across each other. And so the whole idea of building versus buying comes down to how do we sort of share the cost of the infrastructure we need to build in order to be able to accomplish what is the impact that we're trying to create in people's lives. So I start with that build, collaborate wherever I can, build only where necessary as the posture for that basic economic reason. Then I'm looking to say, like, when does it make sense to build? Well, it only makes sense to build within the parts that are very uniquely the value prop, the very uniquely the parts that are uniquely yours to create for customers. And if you really inventory all the products and services that you offer and you kind of break it down, what you realize is that probably about 20% of what you do is really novel. Like if you go to a house, we've all built houses before. You go in there, it's like, all right, how many times how much fretting did you do over your 2x4s?
Right.
I don't really think about like how many custom pipe sizes that I'm going to work with.
Yes.
It is but I'll fret over that 20% in terms of understanding what fixtures I'm going to do, or what's the actual square root of it, of the actual room size, where the windows are placed, how's the direction of the sun. That 20% is the novel part of the house that actually makes it have that, and that's actually where a lot of the value is even created from. Not the 2x4s I'm using, not the sheetrock, not the plywood, all that sort of stuff. And so what we want to be able to do is to say, build the part that is novel for you. And even in that part, try to say, like, is it something that I need to build from scratch, or is it something, that platform that I can easily do some customization with? And so that kind of, those two frameworks, one is like collaborate wherever you can, find out who else God's called into, find out who else is in the business community where that we can share the cost together and we can grow the market demand together, and then go ahead and invest in things that are truly going to be what your unique fingerprints are going to be at, because that's where you're going to get the greatest return.
Yeah. I love the way you're thinking about that. Now, you've recently done a partnership with Glue.
Yes.
So Glue is another business. I don't fully understand what all they're up to, but talk about how that partnership makes sense. What are you working on together, that Servant and Glue?
Yeah. Well, I'm very excited about this partnership with Glue. My partner, Ranji Thomas, and Scott have a 20+ year history together. I have a 6-year history with Scott. I just got a chance to walk alongside him and witness firsthand just the quality of an individual that he is, and his heart and compassion for the church. What Glue has been working on is trying to figure out what part for for-profits and nonprofits, what parts of their organizations do they struggle with the most, and are also the same parts that every organization struggles with, and they're saying, can we provide a set of commoditized services and capabilities they can all take advantage of, so that they can do, going back to like, should we build or buy,
right? They
can focus on that 20% that makes them very unique and allows them to bring their specific capabilities to the marketplace. So Glue has, technically it's called a vertically integrated cloud. How's that for you?
Yes.
I don't know. If that's, it's fun to throw out big consulting words. It kind of shows you, how I get paid by the PowerPoint and by the big word. But the whole idea of the vertically integrated cloud is to simply say there's a set of integrated capabilities that are integrated, that allow for that are that are then tailored for the particular industry that you're working with.
Yeah.
Because every industry has like a common need, like we all need to track customers, but the customer looks different and the needs of the customer are different. And so what you do is you say, all right, if I got to track customers, how do I track nonprofits? How do I track for-profits? What's their unique, what's the unique style of communication they need? What's the additional information that would be valuable to them? And so what you get into a vertical cloud, you can start to go ahead and create capabilities that are specific to your vertical that you're serving. And so what Glue said is there's two things that ultimately organizations are struggling with. One is, how do I reach customers?
Yep.
And reach is really important because it has to do with how I message, with how I drive donations, it's how I drive revenue. Like that's one particular need. And the second part is a technology infrastructure that lowers that IT burden on side of organizations. Because a lot of ministries are not built for tech.
Right.
What they're built for is to serve people.
Yep.
And they have to do tech as a product of doing that at any level of scale. And so what Glue is simply saying, we want you to spend all your time creating, focus on creating impact. And what we'll do is we'll have a series of tools through our vertically integrated cloud that will help you be able to sort of lower your cost and the operational burden to support your system organization on technology side and be able to help expand your reach. Because they're really about trying to they're really trying to help organizations scale their ministries. And because they're really scaling ministries is really serving people, and serving people is how we ultimately bring the world of Christ. So that's what Glue does. Hopefully that kind of helps.
Yes, it does.
With kind of like thinking about it. So when Scott was, so they made a significant investment in a Servant. Scott and the 6 of us that started Servant. Scott was one of them. And then mid-year, we became a partner with them where they made a more of a significant one. And our job is to sort of sit down with organizations and help them think through that strategy front. I'm more focused on the impact side. What are you feeling called to do? And then how do we sort of do everything we can to allow you to pursue that? And then understanding the organizational constraints. If it is reach, how do we bring in reach technology? If it is around your internal operationals and IT support is challenging, how do we bring the support there so that ultimately we can go ahead and expand the impact that you're doing within the kingdom?
I love it. I wanted to do now a completely different topic because I learned about this through our mutual friend, Scott. You've got a new project going on you're calling Great Grants.
Yes.
So talk about what Great Grants is.
Yeah. Well, the website you can go to is greatgrants.ai. So you get a chance to see this one. I'll say that one of the things that God's put on my heart is to help align capital for the kingdom. What I think is well, first off, I realize that God has all the resources, and we're not a resource starved community. We might just need to have it more aligned and effectively. So I feel really called in this next season of my life to really lean in and say, how do we align capital for kingdom work? And so by the way that God kind of orchestrates when we kind of step out and kind of follow what he says is that he opens up doors for us to walk through. And one of those is really, one of them has been Great Grants. And so we were invited by the Faith Office, White House Faith Office, to set up an organization that could help bridge the gap between the government and the faith-based for-profits and nonprofits to get them more involved in the granting that's available today. And so a lot of traditionally, the faith community has been absent from the granting process that's out there. The government grants about $1.5 trillion a year.
Wow.
If not more, towards initiatives to support, the kind of health and human services, things from addiction to anti-trafficking to foster care to the opioid epidemic to joblessness, like the things that we care about deeply in the church. The government is granting out to organizations to say, come partner with us to solve these in our communities. But the faith community has been largely absent because they don't quite understand the complexity of working with it. They're also worried about what restrictions would come. And unfortunately, they've also been sidelined from it. Where there's folks that have that are, well, they're not positive to our worldview. And so what we're doing is we're coming in and saying, how do we get more faith-based community? We're being asked, like, help bring that faith community close, because we really believe that the faith community has a higher efficacy rate in the work that they do than the traditional vendors that are bringing out there today. And so they're really interested in sort of having that. And so now if you're going to bring a whole bunch of people in to do anything, you got to do it with technology. And so we're building this AI platform that is allowing organizations to rapidly become eligible. So you have to actually, to get a grant, you just can't simply say, give me money. What you have to be able to say is you have to be able to show, you have to register yourself. You have to become compliant from a standpoint of making sure there's financial controls in place so that you can be responsible for it. You can make sure that you're set up within all the government systems so you can be a known entity. Then that's all about eligibility. We then you have to then apply for the grants that are most aligned for you. So, realizing that most people have never done this before, so we're using AI as a way of sort of doing not just drafting the full submissions, and then what we're doing is creating services that once a grantee has received a reward, that we can help them with their auditing and compliance. We can help them with being able to track the efficacy of the work, which we promote the Human Flourishing Index as a measurement of understanding positive outcomes. To be able to sort of engage with local communities and churches, to be able to make sure that the money that comes through is done in partnership with local churches and communities, because we care about our community. And then finally thinking about ways in which we can engage with public-private partnerships to be able to make sure that as we grant, that we're able to take sure the grant money can then be matched with private dollars to be able to sort of really scale.
Yeah.
So that platform is allowing us to be able to do what we've been asked to do, which is to bridge the gap and bring a large number of faith-based for-profits and nonprofits into the cycle to be able to go ahead and serve the community as well.
Yeah. And that's greatgrants.ai.
That's right.
And so people who want to find you on the servant side, how do they find you there?
Ben at servant.io, or you just can go to servant.io and see a bit about our story and the organizations that we serve. And then you can go to greatgrants.ai for that newest venture that we're doing. And that's a fun one. I got a chance to sort of be a part of that founding executive team. And then Servant, it's also a mission that is what Servant was built to do, is to very quickly be able to kind of step into these asks that we get, these God-sized visions, and make them come to life.
Yeah, that's exciting. I want to end with maybe a bigger think question, because we've talked about AI. We know it's becoming more powerful, and there's opportunities for it to become more present in ministry. What's the one thing, in your opinion, that the church should never automate, no matter how efficient the technology makes it?
We cannot surrender the Holy Spirit to technology. It is really meant to, there is something about the way the Spirit moves inside of us that we have to make sure that we are constantly bringing into the tools that we engage with. What will happen is, I love the ability for the powerful tool like this generative AI work to be able to sort of create drafts of, like in this case, grants.
Right.
To be able to go ahead and help be able to sharpen the ministry language for a speech or a presentation. We can't afford for it to delegate our spiritual journeys.
Yeah,
we have to make sure that that we are having it as a tool that brings us, that assists us, not a delegation of do my thinking for us. Because when we delegate our thinking for it, what we do is we disengage the Holy Spirit in the work that we're doing. And so that part is first off, is a posture piece, more than anything else. Is like, it's a first order concept of it. And so I think about first order principles, and it's in Proverbs. It says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom.
Right.
And so what happens is, if we're not careful, and this is why building our own, I wouldn't say frontier models, but being thoughtful about flourishing models in AI, how are we building it and how we're using it, and the technologies that we're doing, is that we need to make sure that the fear of the Lord, which is the constraint of the gospel in terms of the way that it sort of gives advice, the way that it seeks the flourishing of our communities, that has to become first. Because if we don't tell it what to do, it will take its own path. And so for me, when we delegate down, we got to make sure that we don't, if we let it do our thinking for us, what we're doing is we're delegating the Holy Spirit, the gift of the Holy Spirit, to us, to these tools and operations we're using. And we have to do everything we can to avoid that.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I appreciate you coming and joining our show. And I love you guys, our audience. You've given us 30 minutes of your time. I know that's very valuable. If you liked what you heard today, please like and subscribe to see more. Until next time.